Faith Over Breakfast. My name's Eric. I'm from the Village Church in Tucson, and Andy Littleton is sitting across from me, and he is from Mission Church. We're both pastors. We just threw out 30 minutes of Super Bowl, MLK, the wall, 32 days of shutdown. We did not get to domineering pastors because we're in charge, and that's the way it is.
Yeah, we do what we want.
All right, so
there you go.
There you go. Hey, live.
Oh, hey.
We got music.
This is Faith Over Breakfast.
Faith Over Breakfast.
And we've got music. Hey, Eric, we've just had a great round of tech savviness in which we ended up just using the other microphone because we don't know
what we're doing.
So one of these days we'll get a professional in here or something, or not.
We thought we were professionals because it was working professionally last week.
Yeah. It's probably me and my computer, honestly, because I don't know anything about it. I can type, and I've got like one quick command down. That's about it. Right. So let's blame me and just move on. So we've got some topics. We've we
have our own show notes and everything.
We were
show notes.
I mean, we've of course there's someday you look back in 10 years at this podcast, you'll remember the great government shutdown of 2019 and 18, and that's happening. We're 32 or 3 days into that. So there's that. It was just Martin Luther King Day. We had an interesting discussion with our staff about Sanctity of Human Life Week, and then Martin Luther King, racial, how much of this do we talk about at church? That came up. I didn't even mention that. That's new to you right now. There was the Super Bowl is coming up, and
and I like to talk sports.
You're a big sports guy, I know. And what else did I say?
I put random thoughts from tired pastors, and then somebody sent me a article saying, how do churches end up with domineering bullies for pastors? That came from
and they were trying to suggest something to you.
No, it's actually an avid listener, and she's been on the show, so I don't think
But she's trying to say, you're domineering.
No, she actually was very kind in saying that I wasn't.
Of course not. Yeah, you're not domineering. Well, most of the time.
I try not to be.
Yeah. So let's start at the top and see what happens. We got about 30 minutes here.
30 minutes because
of
you
our
have an
technical
appointment
difficulties.
With a villager.
Yeah. With somebody from your church.
Somebody from my church.
Yeah, we're going to talk. He wanted to talk about you.
About domineering.
Yeah. Feels a little controlled.
Oh,
so there's that.
Yeah.
But, okay. So this is, again, our premise. Pastors. This is what would happen if we're sitting down to breakfast, which we are sitting down to coffee.
Right.
And so if I were to say, so what do you think of this? How are you processing the government shutdown at your church, or are you?
Well, as in anything, it's an undercurrent, right?
Yeah.
And the longer that it plays itself out, the more impact it's going to have on people.
Right.
But it has not been a lot of discussion other than because we're going through Daniel, the consistent reminder that presidents, governments, they're not who's in charge.
Ultimately.
They are placed there by God, and God is doing things in the midst of the shutdown. God is doing things in the midst of the wall or no wall. God is doing things always, and our job is to tend to the things that He's doing.
Yeah.
And so that requires a lot of artistry, I think, and carefulness, and being in the present, and not worrying about the future, because a lot of people talk about how in the government shutdown, people's jobs are at risk, or people are not getting paid, and it's affecting the economy. And yet Jesus says, that we're not to worry about tomorrow, because today has enough troubles of its own. And so there's something about saying, okay, well, what's the crisis now around me? Where's God needing me to step in? What's He doing in people's life in moments of crisis and trial? So, I'm not so into making subversive political statements about shutdowns and how governments fight with themselves.
Yeah. I mean, it's right. We also haven't said anything at church, and it's and we, as we've talked about before. I mean, I think both of our churches have, are not politically uniform.
No, not at all.
Yeah, not at all, which I think is good. And so I don't think we're not avoiding it, but it also isn't. We're coming to worship God, and there's always some crisis, in my life and somebody's life, and or in the country or in the world. And kind of what we're doing when we gather for church is we're gathering around the thing that is solid and secure, that doesn't shift, and government is not that.
Right.
So though, but it's frustrating. Like I think I would, if somebody in our church came to me, which they have not yet, and said, "Hey, I'm being affected by this," I would sit with them and that I could see how that would be very frustrating, that other people not being able to negotiate is impacting me, and that. But there's a part of me that's like, gosh, that in some way, shape, or form is happening all the time. I was just sharing with you how it's happening in my business to some degree, and it's happening in my home, and there's ways in which like the stuff of other people impacts me, and my stuff impacts them. This is just a larger scale,
sure,
affecting more people, but we haven't made like a statement. So what do you do with? It was interesting because yesterday I was watching all the Martin Luther King posts, and I'm I feel we are greatly indebted to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and I have a lot of respect, and so that this isn't by no means meant to diminish any of that, but it is interesting how, I don't know, it just seemed like everybody did the Martin Luther King Instagram post, and people who I know, and I'm like, do you really care, or did you just do the post right now? So there's that, and then we have, like, in our church, somebody who or a number of people, but especially one dear friend who was very, like, the sanctity of human life is of utmost importance, and shared about that on Sunday. But I was a little worried about the people who were going to take this as like a political statement, though I think that it's every political statement has a moral element, and every moral element has a political layer, and every religious claim makes a political claim. I don't think you can separate the two.
No.
So anyway, do you do any of these things? Does the Village do these things ever? Do you ever talk about sanctity of human life or Martin Luther King Day or?
No, we didn't. Well, we didn't address Martin Luther King Day at all from up front, and we rarely do things about the sanctity of life up front,
right?
Because in some ways, it's not what we're about, and so we have to be real careful, because when you're a church, you have some kind of public persona,
right,
and people want to add on public values, more values to that persona, and then you become kind of weighted down in the way that you can express yourself. It's not that we don't honor what Martin Luther King did and want to further that. It doesn't mean that we are in a place where we don't want to fight for innocent life, but that's not who we are. That's not what we're about in the sense of what the mission of our church is. Now, those things all come into the mission, which is, for us, we keep saying, healing the city one person at a time. So without one person is wrestling with those things, then we're engaged in them.
But you're not attempting to speak to the nation,
right?
About,
and that doesn't mean churches aren't called to that. Many churches are, but I think we're just one little part of the body of Christ. We don't need to encompass everything that the body of Christ is. Right. Maybe we're just the toe. We cry when we get stubbed. We're trying to keep everybody balanced. that's our job.
Yeah.
Our job isn't to look forward and see where we're going. That's not our thing. And that's kind of how I understand.
Yeah. I mean, I'm torn on this stuff because I think we need to shape people in a way of discipleship that is different from that which the nation would. And I do think the nation is shaping people in a way of discipleship, and I think football is shaping people in a way of discipleship.
Sure,
yeah. And so I do think we need to shape people, and that would include things like we fight for innocent life here.
Yes.
And we and including the folks that Martin Luther King was fighting for.
Yes.
And so I'm torn on. I do feel like those things can be mentioned. I just worry about doing it on the day when it's become a national day, because it feels like we're following the rhythm of the nation.
Yes.
And it comes across to people as being a political movement instead of being like we are following our king.
Right.
In real tangible ways. So that's why I do sort of cringe sometimes when I see all the Martin Luther King posts, and I'm like, yeah, but I feel like it's one thing to quote the guy, it's another thing to live as he lived, and I feel uncomfortable quoting the guy when I'm not living as he lived.
Right. Well, and I would rather, I do believe
I've quoted him before.
Sure,
but I mean, I'm just saying, like, but like making a big like we're all about this.
Yeah.
I can I honestly say like we are taking up the mantle?
Right. No, I agree. I think all those things as a church, especially in leadership and as you preach, are things that have to come out of your heart as a speaker, but also they're issues that you can address as you walk through the gospel itself, and you're shaping those things. And they don't have to be on the day. They can be a consistent and constant thing.
And I would much rather speak to these things when the text that we preach speaks, so there are moments, but then the hard thing is you don't do it very often, especially in our context where you do 1 John for a year. The text that might bring you to speak about racial reconciliation happens once that year.
Sure.
Maybe.
But I mean, I think, so you can always missionally contextualize what you're speaking on.
Right.
And so I do think that all parts of 1 John speak to racial reconciliation.
And if you want to, and you could make the whole book about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think the thing is, like, for me, I do talk about the sanctity of life, but I talk about it in the context of how it's impacted me. So I'm part of Generation X, which is the smallest generation, and that's because a huge portion of us were aborted. Yeah. Well, that has a deep impact on me when I begin to contemplate how many peers I've lost because of abortion. So that's a serious issue for me, and the impact it's had on our country. And I can talk about that.
And our person who shared from a personal place and experience, which definitely made it much, it didn't, I hope it didn't come across as like, this is just, they're just doing this like, cause it's the day. I mean, that definitely wasn't how they shared it at all. So, and I love when they share from that place about it, because it matters. It's impacted their life.
And for me, the other thing is, until I got a phone message recently, yesterday, with somebody asking from our church about maybe they could share their story. I didn't know it was the sanctity of life.
Yeah, I don't really follow that stuff. Like the days, the specific days.
I knew it was Martin Luther King Day coming up.
Right.
But I really wasn't it wasn't in my, because like I feel like those things are, I mean, I think it's good that we have the day. I think it's good to affirm the journey of the African American in our community. And where they were. But the reality is, when you were talking about all those people who are posting, like, most of the time they're not thinking about how they're still the oppressor.
You're right.
And how their actions as, Anglo-Saxons, most of them.
So the white, health food store that's pricing things way out of, where no African American any impoverished person, including a great number of African Americans, can't walk in and buy this food, but it's like, you're not. That's what I'm talking about. Like, are we really taking up the mantle,
right? Or
is it just, I'm gonna jump on this right now. It's a good moment for me to post, which is almost like gross. Like, and I've struggled with that in the, like, I think, and this is coming from early in the church days. Like, I saw one time on Martin Luther King Day, everybody was doing a post, and so I did one too, and I felt kind of weird about it.
Right.
And this is me looking back and going, I don't even know if I should have done that.
Yeah.
I should do things, but I don't know if I should have done that.
Right. Which, I mean, and I haven't read a lot about this, but I mean, the reality is that right now we still have we're creating very strong racial identities instead of beginning to learn to sit down and talk. So even most recently in the news about the protests that happened between the Native American community and then you begin to dig into the details of that, and what you hear is that it's not just, white people kind of hanging on to their own identity. It's both the Native Americans and then a third group, and all of this is going kind of, we're kind of becoming like Eastern Europe and really becoming, what do you call it? Nationalized to our own identities, our own racial identities. And so it's scary where we're at in things.
Yeah. And so, and with that said, I also don't want to neglect any of these issues, because it is scary, and it does, and these are, I mean, I think the church and the gospel absolutely shapes the way we think about these things. So I don't want us to not talk about it and just people come and Jesus forgave me of my sins today again, and we don't show how that impacts any of this stuff. Like, not interested. It does.
Yeah, it impacts it a lot.
Yeah. So I don't want to neglect it, but I don't know, there's something about me that's like, when we just do it on the day that the government has decided, this is the day that you remember this, and you do it that day, and then and your actions are not in keeping with repentance.
Right.
I don't know. There's something about that.
And we've talked about it before, but, diving into this issue is way above us. Right. Not that we can't talk about it, but when it comes to just the systemic issues of the black man and his, and just how so much is built up against him, and how much you and I participate in that,
right,
even though we're trying to be advocates at the best we can in our lives. It's a big topic, and it requires a lot of in-depth thinking. And sometimes you may be in that place when your congregation is not, and so bringing them along is going to take a long time, or it may not be the calling in that particular season. So these are big issues. So let's just talk about the Super Bowl.
There you go. That was a transition.
No, I hear what you're saying. I mean, you hate football.
Is it the Rams and the Patriots?
It is the Rams.
Okay, I almost didn't even remember that, though I heard about it yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I don't hate football.
No.
Here's the thing. I love watching just about any sport.
Oh, nice.
But I frankly, don't know how anyone is able to prioritize it the way that they do.
Right.
It's baffling to me. I mean, and I look around and I'm like, I don't know. I struggle with priorities, but this is not one I'm struggling with.
Well, yeah, that's interesting. Maybe we could just shift off of that to talk about time management, because I watched a really interesting TED Talk. No, but this is fascinating when you say, I don't know how people do this. This woman was talking about how she kept track of this very busy woman's life for like a week, and they wrote everything down. Well, the woman ended up coming home from work on a Monday or something like that, and she had the water heater had flooded the entire house.
Okay.
And so it took her 7 hours between plumbers and getting people in that week. She put an extra 7 hours. She didn't plan that 7 hours, but that 7 hours still happened, and she still got everything else done she needed to get done.
Right.
And so if you had asked her before, do you have time for a water heater to break, she would have said no.
No.
But since it did, you did it. And the person's point was basically, if you make a certain thing a priority,
you have time. Yeah. And I've seen this over and over.
It's crazy.
And the phrase, and it comes out of my mouth, but that I don't have time is so relative.
It is very relative.
I don't want to say truth is relative, but this
particular truth is relative.
Yeah, because absolute, like people I know who I think would report extreme busyness do all sorts of things, because they want to.
Right.
At the end of the day. And me too.
Right. Well, on top of that, this lady said that people who report that they work 75 hours or more per week consistently, when it's checked, work 25 to 30 less hours than they actually said they worked. So people who say, I work 75 hours, just worked 40, 45 hours that week, and that feels really busy to them.
Right. And they took... And this is a hard thing, is you can't tell somebody you are or are not busy, because busy is a term that you have to define for yourself.
Right. But the reality is, even if you work 60 hours a week and you sleep 8 hours a night, you still have like 50 hours a week of free time.
Right. Yeah.
So, obviously it gets picked.
And you do some, and for some people, that is going to include being extremely devoted to the throwing of a ball.
Yes. On weekends.
That is named football, though the foot makes contact with the ball rarely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's so I don't know. I just think, but I think Super Bowl as an idol is always fascinating to me, because and our church does this. It became a tradition because...
Yeah, you don't even have church, man.
Well, we have a service at 2:30.
Oh, okay.
And the reason we ended up doing that was the very first time we walked into our building, we got in at in the afternoon.
Which is kind of a cool thing. Yeah.
And then we all watched the Super Bowl together. So it's like a tradition.
Yeah.
So we tell the story of the village and the building, and then we go watch Super Bowl. But if you just step back for a moment, you're like, oh my gosh, this is a huge idol that we have erected stadiums, and we have statues that we venerate. We have a temple, and it was in Ohio. I don't know where the...
We have, oh gosh. If you think about it as a religion, it gets way more of our devotion. And it's set up just like one, like you said.
We have, we have our preachers and our disciples, like our Bible studies all week.
We have all of our saints, all the greats that went before, and they're venerated, and they're remembered, and their greatness is told to the next generation.
Yeah,
and,
it is a religion, and we participate. It's a national religion.
It is, absolutely, and it does something for us.
Yeah,
it gives us. It's an escape.
Right.
From this world. You go into another world where it's just, this combat, and there's a winner and a loser, and people are actually, this is what boggles my mind. And every once in a while I'll feel it in myself, but it actually makes people happy or angry.
Yeah.
And I'll feel it a little bit, but then I see it in others, and I'm like, that's actually happening. Like, you're actually happier because your team
is winning.
Got the ball past the line. You're not happy at home. You're not happy at work.
But you're happy.
But you're happy because these guys in helmets that you don't give a rip about got a ball over a line, and you're actually happy about. And when they don't get it over the line, it wrecks your whole weekend.
Yes,
you're actually angry.
Yeah. You
got your family, you got your friends. Everything's good.
You even had snacks while watching the show.
You have an extra $100 to go to that thing, which is baffling in for the rest of the world that you can. The majority of the world can't do this. You can,
right?
But you're angry.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with it.
Well, and I don't know it either, but to bring it home, what's fascinating to me is it's also connected. Not only is it an idol, it's connected to nationality. Not nationality, to the nation, because we have the flag, we have the singing, we've got the planes flying over, and so all of the controversy recently about kneeling for the national anthem and all that, people have stopped watching football because of that.
Oh yeah.
but they haven't stopped getting upset about the
Oh.
American flag sitting in their church.
Right.
They're fine. Like,
Right.
this weird, like, it's not just the religion of, the football. We have, like, it's our country infiltrated into all of these things. It's how they keep us in control.
That's
some ways.
Yeah, and I'm not saying somebody sat back and was like, "Here's how we're going to control them," but it all gets intertwined and you start realizing these are pretty inseparable things.
Right. Well, Caesar put his statue all over the place to remind everybody, "Hey, I'm in charge." America puts its flag in the churches and puts the flag in the football games to say, "Hey, we're in charge."
Yeah.
Like, the government's here.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're watching you. Know? Don't get out of line. And so I don't know. This is interesting stuff.
It is interesting. Yeah. And the ways that we, I don't know, that we worship it. And then the ways in which all of that so easily, like, we will walk away from worshiping Jesus over anything.
Right.
All it takes is, like, somebody says, "Hey, like, you want to get a beer Sunday night?" And you go, "Yeah, sure. Yeah. Oh yeah. Church. I went last week. I worshiped Jesus last week, and the game's on, no brainer.
Right.
Or, like, a good hike is happening, no brainer.
Yeah.
And we think about that as just like, and I think a lot of us grew up going like, "I have to go to church," and we're resenting that. But
some of us, yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's just like, we'll sacrifice worshiping Jesus for just about anything.
Right. And some of that's the fault of the people who
made it a chore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, but some of it's the way we are doing church and the way we're worshiping Jesus. That it's not a place where you're like, "Oh, I actually tasted and met Jesus," in a way where I don't want to go away from this. Like,
no, but is it always? I've been thinking about this lately. Is it always supposed to feel like that?
It always does to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever not wanted to go. Sometimes I've been a little tired because I'm doing two services.
Right. And I have, it's so ingrained for me and has been since childhood that it's not I don't sit down and go like, "Should I go to church?" And I'm not going unwillingly either. Right. It's just, I go to be with God's people and worship Him. I do. I just do.
Right.
Like, it's such a pattern of life. But I also would assume that it could be like, if it wasn't a pattern of life, it could be a thing that's like, this is okay. I got to go. Like, and sometimes, like, we've heard people like report that, like, it can be because we're a highly relational church, it could be a tiring endeavor, like, to go talk to especially if you're introverted,
Right. And I think obviously the enemy uses that too, as a lie. I mean, I think I believe in the I'm introverted, extroverted thing. Like, I think it's a way that God's made us up. I also think it's a sin pattern.
Sure.
And so we use our introversion to say we're exhausted by conversation. Yet Scripture's pretty clear that you're not to be alone. Right. You're supposed to gather as much as possible, and even more as you see the end coming. I think those are hugely important things. I think the thing about church, somebody said this to me just this week on Sunday. He said, "I love coming to two services. I love it because I sit in this church and I won't even get up and get a Coke or a coffee because I don't want to miss anything."
Yeah.
Like, that man's tasting God, and, even in ways I'm not on Sundays. Yeah. And because if you're looking for Jesus to show up, He will flood you. Yeah. And yes, He'll flood you other ways, but He loves His gathered people.
Oh yeah. He's set it up. This is,
Yeah. I mean, there's something about singing new songs to each other and speaking words to each other and reading the scriptures over each other and listening deeply to what's happening and confessing your sin.
But there's, like, if you are hungry and thirsty for righteousness, you will be filled. Like, that, and for Christ, He will not neglect it. And so that's where one reason I don't badger people about not coming to church is because I want them to come because they're hungry and thirsty. But I think what makes me so sad is the realization that so often we're more hungry and thirsty for other things, and we know that. That's
Sure.
that's true.
Right.
But it's still sad, and it's in me.
Right.
I just happen to be. It's easier for me to see the problem when it comes to football.
Yes. Well, and when it comes to church, it is, even if you love it, a discipline.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
It is a discipline. It's not going to be you just wake up and go, I want to go share my life with others and go, prostrate myself spiritually before a God who I'm going to surrender to. That is an unnatural movement.
It is a very unnatural movement. It's rewarding, and the reward becomes motivating.
And you start to realize I must be there, and that's where I feel that way.
Yeah,
but that's years, right?
Yeah, it takes years of practice.
Yeah,
but sometimes when it's and it also depends on how much you've wrestled with Jesus and how dirty the water you've been drinking. If you've been drinking out of the toilet for a long time, and all of a sudden somebody gives you filtered sparkling water that is restorative, you're like, I don't know, I want that, and that changes your perspective too.